Welcome back to this last session of the day, where we'll get our panel having a bit of discussion about the various issues and themes that we've covered earlier in the day. I've got two things to tell you. One, I'm hesitant to tell you in case it makes you rush through the panel, and that is that there are drinks afterwards out there where we had lunch. And the second thing is that on your seat you would have found one of these. If you could fill them in for the Tax Institute, that would be greatly appreciated. The way I'm going to do the panel is basically I'm going to start off by asking everyone a sort of the same question to get them going, and then I'm hoping very much that we can get some discussion going. If everyone answers the same question, then obviously we won't get very far with so many of you, and I'll also open it up to the floor for questions. So everyone needs no introduction. You know all the participants here. Let's imagine that you're Julia Gillard, but you have some political capital, and you decide that you're going to reform the system. Greg Smith, where would you start? And I'm talking about in the realm of what could be possible.
Well, as I say in my paper today, in terms of what could be possible, I think that we need two things from government, most of all. One is a commitment to reform as an ongoing program. I guess I liken it most to the CLERP program, which none of you will know what I'm talking about, but it's the Corporate Law Economic Reform Program, which was a rolling series of reforms to corporate law, which we did in the 90s when I was doing financial systems rather than tax. And that model gives an investment. It has all of the elements of process that I think a lot of people have talked about today, but it also gives a spine to the system. It was one that was adopted, in fact, by the Costello Treasury. And so it goes beyond just research. So I think that would be the first thing, and I think that there's a large number of low-cost, effective, efficiency-improving, simplification-making reforms, and rather than list them, I'll just leave it at that. The second thing...
Can you just name a couple that you
Well, the type of thing I'm talking about are the idea of a significant improvement in the client relationship between government and taxpayers, so an electronic interface that brings together in a common accounting system, a common account so that people can see their entire relationship with both the tax and transfer system with government, with pre-filled tax returns, with complete sharing of personal information with that individual taxpayer, so that we can move to a much simpler and more streamlined tax and transfer system. The possibility of a complete overhaul of the provisions in trust and capital gains tax law to make them workable and simple. These are the types of things I'm talking about, but there are many, many others. So I think that's whether that's championed by the Board of Taxation, which we already have, or a new entity or body, I don't know, but it would need a standing champion, and a government commitment to that would be a real sign of commitment to improving the Australian tax system. Strategically, I think the government would need to take more time, but I think it should look then to identifying, without committing, the sorts of areas it would like to further discuss with the Australian community, try to obtain a broader support base for it, and in those areas I think we must look at pretty well all of the transfer issues that were raised further this afternoon by ACOS. I think the business tax base and the possibility of a schedule, or at least a commitment ultimately to a lower company tax rate, but with consideration of all of the offsets and base broadening and neutrality possibilities that would need to go with that. For me, I would hope they would commit to doing something about this integration of the disability, aged care, superannuation guarantee, longevity issues, putting all of those together and rethinking the best way to go forward with that, not stopping anything they've already announced, but perhaps recasting it as we go forward in an affordable way to properly address those questions.
Cassandra, if I can ask you, and leaving aside this issue of the body and the process, because I'd like to finish with that as to what we should set up, but where would you start? Like, what could you do reasonably quickly?
Look, I would absolutely back what Greg has said about particularly in the last area. I think part of this is in terms of building the country's stomach for a next stage of actual changes and reform in the tax and transfer system. People really need to feel that they will get something that they can relate to out of this, that it isn't just a debate that's captured by a particular lobby group. And to some extent all of us will represent a particular perspective, but we've got to have a public understanding of why this is hard work has to be done. So I think I would certainly talk about people addressing people's fear about security into the future, but the other part I think is the affordable housing debate. I think it's very alive. I think people really relate to it and understand it, and I think we would be able to garner support for some of the potentially difficult changes around reform with the states, for example, if we could get public support to say this is worth it. And it would probably flush out some of the structural problems that are might be seen as classically taxation transfer questions, but you would understand why we're doing it, because we're looking to be able to afford a house.
Robert, where would you start?
I would have thought that one of the easiest ways to begin, not necessarily to finish this reform, on the state tax angle is for the Commonwealth to engage, the Australian government to engage with the states. Just start that engagement. I imagine that's something that to start can't be that hard. To carry it out in a way that produces a solid outcome is going to be difficult. But that's something that could be announced right after the October forum, a commitment from the government to I guess, harness some of the momentum that I'm starting to see at the state government levels, particularly from the new governments that have come in, where they are saying themselves, as I said earlier this morning, that their own taxes, they're acknowledging, are inefficient, and they're pleading for a discussion as to how they might replace that revenue source.